Hey students, this is a midterm check-in video. I encourage you to watch this because I'm going to take a look back at where we've been. We're going to look at what we're doing, and then we're also going to look forward to where it is we're going for the rest of the semester. It's important now to take stock to understand what we've been doing for the past 8 weeks so that we can make sure we're all on the same page and that we're moving together with purpose in the social studies. So let's go. In the first 5 weeks of class, we were exploring, we were thinking, and we started planning. We have to make sure that whatever we do with a purpose. It has meaning, and that meaning should be rooted in what it is we believe our purpose to be as elementary social studies teachers. We took time to really consider what it is we believed about teaching and learning and how social studies can fit inside of that. The concepts of citizenship and democracy and social justice. We're taking a step back and we're looking at the classroom overall to think first what it is we believe before we step into that classroom to engage students in learning social studies education. So we began with an investigation of what social studies actually is. We looked at those 4 primary disciplines: economics, geography, civics, and history. We're expanding our thinking about social studies beyond simply history to be inclusive of all the disciplines, because we pull on each one of these disciplines as we plan our lessons for students in the classroom. Building from the disciplines, we dove into the concepts associated with each one of those disciplines. The concepts allow us to pull together multiple lessons. The concepts focus us as teachers and what it is we're trying to address within the lesson as it relates to one of those 4 disciplines. We investigated the standards, working to see what it is that the content tells us to teach. And this is important because there is no separation between content and pedagogy. The content will always tell you how to teach it. And that's why we deconstructed the standards. We performed standards operation to investigate, to break down those standards, to find the concepts so that we could then begin to ask questions with and for our students. Also, looking at this chart, you can see from the content comes the pedagogy, and from the pedagogy comes the technology. If we think of our content first, learning first, we then think about the pedagogical ways we can engage that content with our students. And from within that pedagogical engagement, we can find the technology that best allows the learning to take place. It's an emergent, organic way of thinking about teaching and learning. And we did that using Bloom's taxonomy. Now, Bloom's taxonomy allows us to think about how and what we're doing in the classroom, moving beyond the base remembering and understanding up to evaluating and creating. We want our students to be engaging all levels of Bloom's. We want to move beyond the lower order thinking, and we want to challenge our students to higher order thinking. And we can do that if we think about and pay attention to Bloom's taxonomy as we prepare questions and as we develop activities in the classroom for our students. What we did was look at it like this. In citizenship and government, economics, history, and geography, how do we help students move beyond remembering and understanding to evaluating and creating? How can they use their understanding of history to evaluate decisions made in economics? How can they apply geographic skills in the creation of a documentary exploring the history of the National Park Service? How do they use their ability to remember particular facts about citizenship and government in order to appraise the decisions made economically in the Office of Management and Budget? Everything comes together. We want to utilize Bloom's to not just ask questions, but to think about the active learning that can take place. That's why I supplied you with that flip book of Bloom's taxonomic verbs as well as Bloom's taxonomic question stems. That's why we took time to think about
developing our ability to ask good questions. We want to move beyond those hook questions. We want to move beyond leading questions. We want to focus on guiding and compelling questions. We want to ask good supporting questions that allow students to answer the compelling question. And if we allow ourselves to use a framework like Bloom's, it helps us develop our ability to plan and execute social studies lessons in our classrooms.
As we explored the standards, we then began to write objectives. And the objectives follow a very specific formula that I want you to use as you write your objectives. My students will X in order to Y, which they will show with Z. They're going to do something to learn something, and then they're going to show that learning. It is the action, it is the content, it is the assessment. And I want that to be seen in each one of your objectives. And so in these first 5 weeks, that's what we did. We took time to think about teaching, to prepare ourselves before we could dive in to what that looks like in the classroom. We developed a foundation of thinking. We considered social studies within its 4 disciplines. We considered the concepts of what we associate with each one of those disciplines. We looked at the standards for our content to begin to ask questions and develop objectives from our understanding of social studies. Asking questions using Bloom's taxonomy that allows the students to investigate the content, make their claims and arguments based in evidence, and all of this has to take place because none of it matters unless we know what our purpose is, unless we know why it is we do what we do. And we have to understand our purpose, we have to understand what social studies is, and then we can move into teaching. And that's the second part of the class that we're in right now. We are in phase 2 now, the experiential method. In this next phase of the class, we have been engaging in the classroom the methods that you should be using with your own students to teach and engage the social studies. The first method was simulations, dramatizations, and role play, placing students in situations where they have to make decisions. They have to role play out the scenario. There's a context, there's a active experience for the students to engage.
After we participated in an example of a simulation, we took a look at this. After we participated in our own simulated decision-making experience, we took a look at some examples, as well as this very handy flowchart about when and how we might gamify or dramatize the social studies in our classrooms. I then asked you to include somewhere on your digital resume your write-up of an idea for simulation in your classroom based in the standards.
The next experiential method was local and oral history. We utilized Flip to go into the neighborhood to find that local history, to record it and present it to our peers in the classroom. We think about tying into the familial and the community level of content that exists all around us. The social studies does not just happen in books, and it does not just happen in the classroom. It happens everywhere.
Keeping in mind, again, we want to activate the social studies. We want to provide students with relevant and meaningful and authentic activities to engage their developing social studies content and skills. I provided an example to consider about statues around the nation coming down, suggesting perhaps what students could do would be to investigate local important people and events to instead replace these statues, or perhaps identify a location for a new historical marker. These are opportunities for students to not only learn, but to take informed action. And it's rooted in local history, and it's rooted in that oral history that you can collect from family and community members. Teachers provide the conduit and the opportunity for students to realize the wealth of knowledge that exists all around them. I asked for you to create a write-up example of where you yourself may find local and oral history in the standards, and you had a timeline assignment to complete.
And last week, we dove into the use of primary artifacts and primary resources, developing students' inquiry-based skills so that they can learn how to observe and infer and classify, further developing their ability to inquire and develop answers. Now, each of these is a tried and true approach to the classroom for our students. Somewhere in here is where you should find yourself, your personality, find what fits your style of teaching. And so now we have a lot of tools in the toolbox. And as we move forward, you should begin to work those tools into your educational thinking. Remember, you have a philosophy of education to address on your digital resume at the end of the year, but I would not wait until the end. How do you answer the following questions? What is good teaching? What is good learning? What is the purpose of education? What is worth knowing? And who is that educated person? You should answer all of these through the lens of social studies. We have already addressed all of these in one way or another through our 8 classes. Speaking of the digital portfolio, let us not forget all of the materials that we have been creating, all of the activities that we have been engaged in should find their way in some shape or form into your digital resume. Please, this is not a wait till the end of the year to put everything together. You should be developing this as you would a physical binder, putting your thoughts together. How do you see simulations in your classroom? How do you see the use of primary sources and primary artifacts in your classroom? How do you see the use of local and oral history in your classroom? I expect to see your thoughts based in the standards for each one of these. All of our activities, all of our projects go on the final digital resume. Think of it as your portfolio to say, hey, when I'm an elementary social studies teacher, this is who I am and what I will do. Another part of that digital resume is your blog. The blog is reading based. Please remember, the blog is reading based. You should be citing the materials that we read each week in your blog. You should be reflecting and thinking. It's not just a summary, it's an explanation of your thinking. How do you see the use of simulations? How do you see the use of local and oral history based in the literature that we're reading? Everything we read forms the foundation for what we do in class. You need to make sure you catch up on your reading over spring break. I expect to see citations and quotes in your blogs. Also, the blogs should be more than just words. They should be audio and video. There should be images. Provide the context for your thoughts. I've shown you a few examples. Please make sure you're building and growing your blog forward. So what's next? We will continue to read each week, and I really encourage you to dig into the readings. The readings, again, provide the foundation for everything that we do in class. We read about the creation of a museum through the use of personal primary artifacts and resources. We read about how to build simulations before we actually did the simulation in class. Stay current with the readings because that allows you to get more out of class time when we meet together to engage what democratic classrooms look like and should be. Active and meaningful. And so moving forward, what's next is, like I said, we're going to continue reading. We're going to engage in more methodological experiences. We have some mini projects to complete each week. We're going to play with some more digital tools. And in the last couple of classes, you're going to present your digital stories to us. You also have your social justice action research project that will be due at the end of the year, and your unit plan. So while you're on spring break, here's what I would suggest. Get caught up on your reading and your blogging. Clean up your digital resume portfolio. Make sure you've identified articles for your social justice action research project, and make sure you're beginning to put together your unit plan and complete writing that digital story lesson plan. Everybody, have a good spring break. Use it to get caught up. I will see you when you return. Have a great week.